Hey everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Biometrics Leadership Lab Live. We are here to support you on your biometrics journey, giving you tools and knowledge you need to move from lead to leader. And today we are talking about R again. Thank you for joining us live, and if you're watching the replay, thank you for taking the time to catch up. You can ask questions on the event notice on LinkedIn, and we will see them, but we can't respond in writing during the broadcast. Try to answer it live, and if we don't, we'll answer it after the event, either in the comments or in an upcoming edition of our newsletter. Before we get started, we're going to do some quick introductions. I am Amanda Cross, founder of Crossfield, a biometrics and clinical data advisory, helping small and mid-sized companies and teams manage data risk, integration, oversight, and governance. With decades of experience in clinical research from statistician to COO, I leverage my cross-functional experience and training to help teams integrate, communicate, and collaborate in order to improve data integrity. And now to my panelists today. Sunil?
Hi, thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate joining you on this special topic. My name is Sunil Gupta. I've been in the industry for about 3 decades. And more recently, in the past 5-6 years, I've seen the growth and the trend of R. So founder of R Guru. I provide a corporate mentoring and training and infrastructure so that teams can be very productive getting into this field of R, because it's quite different from what we've been doing in SaaS for the past 3 decades. So I'm really excited to be here and share my knowledge and experience to help organizations through this process.
And I'm glad to have you back. And just so everybody knows, we're not talking about the technical components of R, but more about what R is doing and how it's changing the work that's going on. And we talked about R, I went back and looked, I think it was just about a year ago. So I've seen a lot more about it over the past 12 months. I get asked about it a lot. So what's actually changed in the last 12 months in R in the industry?
Yeah, no, this is great timing. I just recently came from the Fuse US Connect in Austin, and at that time they provided the survey, the Pharmaverse survey, and in that, what was interesting to see is that the people who were the early adapters of R during that time, what they're saying now is they're not curious, they're not wondering how valuable R will be, because they realize that. They see that. What they're seeing now, the type of questions that they're asking is what's the next step? What are the things, how we can govern, how we can validate, how we can run this to scale? So what that says is R has gained traction. People are much more comfortable with it. And it's taken some time because, SaaS has been the legacy, been the foundation, the language that everybody is so common. But R has made really good strides in addressing many of the things that people are concerned about. And so this is the next good evolution process. And the growth of Pharmaverse continues, because we have over 80 packages. And that is really for our industry. And so people are learning to recognize that, saying, okay, what can we learn? What can we do more about that? So it's nice to see that type of trend moving forward.
So I'm curious if what you're hearing, what you heard, was consistent among CROs and like sponsor companies, and who who's kind of said, yeah, we're totally transitioning to R.
Yeah, no, good question. So what you have is the Pharmaverse is built on, the packages are built on collaboration between sponsors and CROs and industry executives. So what you have is leaders or champions of those specific packages. So organizations, just to give you a few names: Eli Lilly, GSK, Merck, along with CROs. Are serious with R, making a total commitment into R, migrations from SaaS to R. Other organizations also being very, very active with their role in being leaders, thought leaders, pioneers in R, include, Genentech, Novo Nordisk, Bristol Myers, Denali. Because what you have is you have people thinking outside of the box, and they're more in tune with, okay, let's have a common goal, common interest, and so a tremendous collaboration that's going on. So it's good to see. And I also want to point out that it's not all or nothing. People don't have to completely migrate to R. They can have more of a balance between SAS and R. So it's a good, you need to plan short term as well as long term. And for those who have, good knowledge, understanding the risks and proper planning involved, could make that a big transition completely into R, but that's not always a requirement.
Which is a great setup for the next question. Because is there any future for SAS only teams, or do you have to adapt for R and get it incorporated into your workflow?
Yeah, that's great. As organizations and programmers come to me, they have many of these types of questions. And what I say is, there will, I think there's still a place definitely for SAS. Organizations, again, have a lot of legacy in there. We have resources that are SAS experts. You don't want to just throw that away. So I think that SAS still plays a very important key role. Keep in mind that, in our field, we still have the double parallel programming. So there's opportunities for SAS to continue being used in the production sense, opportunities for R being introduced for QC, and within R being introduced for QC, for example, you can use tidyverse to do many of the things, creating STTMs or atoms, or you can make use of the pharmaverse for doing those things as well. So organizations have a lot of options, not to mention, in our life cycle, we have, of course, STTMs and atoms. We also have TLGs. And then organizations may think and might want maybe just the value added things that are there in R, which is more exploratory visualization and maybe the shiny apps.
Do you think a programming team can be successful if they just say, we're not getting into R?
Yeah, I think there's some limitations for that. I think they're missing out, because what's happening is, as we get more into, okay, is R just a fad? I think we're realizing that it's not. It is here to stay. So I think even the resistant organizations are realizing that they need to do something with R. It's something that can't be ignored. So I would personally say that organizations are going to be left behind if they're only doing things in SAS, because they're missing out on what everyone else is doing.
Yes, and I think it's important to understand and we will talk about this as we go on, like what can you do in R and what are you doing in R, right? Because I still have people ask me, like, we need to do R. What do we do to do R? And it's like, well, do R, but understanding what you're gaining from introducing R into your programming team's ecosystem is the first step to figuring out what you need to do and what teams need to learn. And I think it's helpful to talk about how some teams are using R and SAS together.
Yeah, no, exactly. As I've been doing a deep dive, my goal objective when I wanted to get into R, first of all, learn insides and outs, learn the key differences, the similarities, learn the pain points, what there is in R, because as a SAS programmer, I have a fixed way of thinking and doing things. And when I get into R, I realized that my world turned upside down. And definitely that's a very frustrating thing. On the one hand, I'm able to do anything and everything. On the other hand, I'm put in this environment where I can't turn on the lights. And so, slowly, what you'll see, what I found is there's a steep learning curve. But what my goal objective was, everything that I've been doing in SAS, I wanted to replicate that in R. And some of the initial challenges, that I saw was, okay, there's thousands of packages, hundreds of functions, and then, tens of parameters. So it's a very, very confusing environment. It's a big jungle. But by focusing on a common goal, my objective was to learn the common or the popular packages. I quickly learned that tidyverse was the way to go. Tidyverse has a collection of industry accepted packages that enable you to bring the data into R to do all the data manipulations you want. SQL, of course, is paramount, and then there are packages within R that enable you to have that complete control functionality. And then, of course, the real benefits of R that's there with the advanced visualization. So I think that, as you're saying, people need to know and understand that you're not going to be losing anything. It's a different way of doing things. And so it just takes a little bit of time and patience in order to learn more and apply more things in R.
So just to show you how far out I am of opening up SAS and programming, I learned, I think just over the past couple of weeks, that there's a proc R in SAS. There's also a proc Python, which is far beyond anything I could figure out how to do. But I was curious, what you've experienced with proc R, and what are some situations where you would call it SAS, do something in R, and then go back to using it in SAS? What's the real world application there?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. In fact, at the conference, I was able to meet up with the Jim Box from SAS Institute, one of the developers for the Proc R, and I was very happy to have him give me a brief demo on it. I think it's a great idea. SAS is realizing that their customer, their user base, is getting into R. Of course, their LSAF has a list of X number of packages that they have, included or compatible with that. So it gives some credences to, them working together with R. This Proc R is a really good step towards that, because what they're saying is, okay, now within the SAS programming environment, when you call Proc R, you're able to run R syntax, so exact R syntax that you would normally run in like RStudio, for example. You have that in your SAS program. So what it does is it will actually execute. Now, of course, you still need to apply proper R programming syntax language in order to make it error-free. But when you run that, the results are displayed within SAS, and so you could do something about it, like do the advanced visualization. So any type of data management or data frame operations you have in R, you could actually do that within SAS without actually leaving SAS. So I think it opens up opportunities for programmers in this new type of role to have the best of both worlds. So being able to run their SAS as well as R programs.
You could, and this example is totally bonkers, fine, but I'm just going to use it. But you could use the same program to generate your output and a matching graph, but you get the better visualization that you could get from R.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yep, exactly. Yeah, so.
And you would need to have a validated instance of R that you're using, right? Like within your organization.
Yeah, exactly. And the validation is a very, very hot topic. And I've been learning a lot about it, and I've been reading a lot about it. The nice thing about it is you're not alone with validation concern. There are proven ways, and that's what I found. As my journey through R continues, is I've taken a look at the leaders who've gone through this path. They have the answers to many of these questions, issues. There are packages that help you do the package management, version control. And this is the thing with R. What it does is it requires organizations to go through this complete checklist to make sure that everything is there lined up, so that you can't leave any stones unturned. So it does require a little bit upfront, IT support and having it in a validated type environment, because before Tidyverse, for example, it was really Wild West, and Tidyverse had some governance and control as to these are best packages to use. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just having grown up on SAS, I think that the open source and I don't want to say uncontrolled, but the different version control that's in place is a little. It concerns me, but also I need to change with the time. So how do you bring reliability and validation and consistency to R packages that you're using? Because ultimately you need to be able to replicate your results. Not just for QC, but 6 or 12 months down the line. And so you need to make sure that the package is stable.
That's exactly right. And I was happy to find, again, there are now tools. There are now tools that will help organizations validate the packages that they have installed. And I think that's a very good logical next step. In the old days, as a consultant, with SaaS environments, I would do IQ, OQ, and PQ testing. And that would be there for all the modules and all the procedures and everything like that. So it's a standard list of tests to perform and run, and then you have the expected results. And so the thing with R is that the base R, with the collection of packages that are there and the functions that are there, and tidyverse packages and functions, so you have this large volume of functions that need to be validated. And fortunately, there are ways that organizations can do it themselves, but it is a good bit of work because they want to be able to do it right. But fortunately, there are tools, there are services, but the tools empower organizations to do the validation, which would be GxP compliant. So to meet that requirement, so it frees them from that concern of, okay, are these packages that are being used in this in the company environment and the SCE fully validated? And as you mentioned, basically what we want to do is you want to set up safeguards, you want to have control, version control. So you don't want anybody to be able to download and install any package there or any updated versions of packages, because that needs to be going through a screening process, testing process, because you want to be able to replicate what you're doing. And so that's all there. And also keep in mind that the validation of the package is one thing. When you in the R environment, you still have the parallel processing, so you needed to source and then QC for the deliverables as well.
So let's talk a little bit about our packages, specifically around SDTM and Atom. I know of Oak and Admiral, and I can say I know their names, and I think as for SDTM and Admiral is for Atom. I'm curious of your experience with these packages and any other ones you know of that are helpful for the work.
Yeah, and when you talk about Pharmaverse, the Oak and the Admiral are paramount. Everybody thinks and wants to gravitate towards that, which is definitely the key reasons for Pharmaverse. As you mentioned, Oak was initially developed. What I have seen and in the training that I provide, the workshops that I provide on Oak and Admiral, basically. They are unique packages dedicated to the development of SDTMs for Oak and then also for Atoms. So what does that mean? So what that means is you have a package Oak that let's say about 50 functions. So now you have 50 functions that are dedicated to help programmers to derive the SDTM variables. So they're specific functions that programmers need to learn how to use and to help them so they don't have to apply the logic. Now, the nice thing about this is you don't have to use Oak, you don't have to use Admiral, but it's there in order to make things easier for you because, again, these functions are dedicated. So if you need to create supplemental domains or you need to merge supplemental domains, that's there. Date conversions from character to numeric. And I'm giving you some examples. The thing about the SDTM or the Oak is that it requires some setup files. So there's a little bit of a setup process that's required because of the control terminology and the way the conversions for the dates and the logic there is for the dates. So that's there. I mean, and organizations need to realize that, okay, if you make a decision to go Oak, that's good, but keep in mind that it's going to be a little bit of a learning process, a little bit of patience in order to actually understand and implement it correctly, whether you're doing it for source for QC. Now, if you go to Admiral, what I found is for the Admiral, I found it to be, I think, little bit less time to actually implement. I think the way the functions are, they seem to be more intuitive. And what I've done is I've done the comparisons of the Admiral functions, and also Admiral maybe have a collection of 40, 50 functions. So with those functions, I've taken a look at how could you do that using tidyverse. And the beauty of this is basically if you know tidyverse, you can learn Oak, you can learn Admiral. Documentation is there with many examples. And what I think is organizations can leverage these for QC or for source programming, but make sure to give some time in order for your team to build up the knowledge, understanding, and expertise.
So a couple of questions. Can you get to every SDTM domain through Oak?
Oh, okay. The question was, can you do every SDTM domain through Oak?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I haven't done that. What I've done is I've done representation of the SDTM, so a DM, AE, LD. Those are three key different types, but other domains can be done with the Oak package. So it's good to know that.
Why do you think? Well, I'm dating myself again, but why do you think that Admiral is a little bit more intuitive than Oak for SDTM?
Yeah, I think that there is more legwork to be done with SDTMs. As you know, with SDTMs, it's the standardized version of the raw data, and so that's, if you take a look at all of the clinical data that's being collected, our first step is to standardize all the values, and the control terminology itself is a workhorse, meaning that there's all the variables, all the values that are there. That initial step is quite time consuming, and in order to do it right, organizations do have some type of structure, metadata type foundation, and Oak, took an approach that just needs to be understood, why they're done, and then organizations need to set that up in order to leverage the Oak the Oak functions. Whereas the Admiral, that initial step of standardization of the values is already there. And so then what you're doing is you're focusing more on, okay, the analysis component. You're taking a look at the analysis set of variables. What are the params that need to go for analysis? So I think that the set of functions developed and can be applied in the Admiral lends itself to be easier, more programming, and less setup time. So that's what I'm thinking.
So we were kind of talking around this, so let's kind of draw a circle around it, I guess, which is, so you can do CDIS conversion in R, right? I mean, obviously people are, we're just talking about the packages. So what's really practical about that, not practical about it, and what do you need to have in success? And I think I have this question later, but we're going to bring it in here as well. Would best practice be today to do it in production of CDIS conversions in R or SAS, and then do the validation in the opposite language? Or would you say, no, validation is just as accurate in R, so you can do your production and your validation in R and be confident? I'm sure people do it, but it just makes me squishy.
Yeah, no, I think the answer, I think, that this really depends on where organizations are in their process of migrating or incorporating R into their workflow process. First of all, at the conference, I was happy to know there was a flyer that CDIS provided at the booth, and what it does is it lists all of the packages. I mean, they embrace open source. That's number one. They also embrace Pharmaverse, and also they list quite a few packages on their flyer that they're encouraging pharma companies to use. So what they're seeing is the collaboration effect, that they're also obviously technical experts, so they also participate in development of these packages. And so their goal objective is to work with the industry and come up with common sets of solutions. And the standards were already there. STTM, IG, ADAM, IG, they're all in there. And while organizations previously were doing things in SaaS, again, when you're doing that, organizations will either have some type of tool to create STTMs or ADAMs, or they would have in-house macros. And so, and organizations may want to continue doing that way, but thinking about the future, what you see is sponsors and CDISC saying, okay, if actually we all work together, we can do more with these common goals, because then organizations don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so what that means is while there are so many packages out there, organizations can actually pick and choose which of the Pharmaverse packages is ideal for them. If they're completely comfortable with their in-house tools or their process for creating STTMs and ADAMs, they can continue using that. But they may want to, for example, use the Define R package for creating Define XML. They may want to use other packages that maybe the data cutoff. So there's a variety of things that can be done so that it can make sense. And with each of these, as organizations are trying something new, they always need to make sure and assess. They don't want to have something that's high risk for the deliverable. They want to allocate time. They want to have enough expertise in order to get the job done, and have the proper guidance. So there's additional things that are practical, that are there for the success.
Throwing in an extra question here, because I'm so heavy CRO side, right? But CROs follow, and we just focus on getting the deliverables out, right? We're doing the most expeditiously and with. So so just that to say, they may not be as quick to move to R or because they have so much legacy SaaS library in-house where they can turn things around very quickly, and to rebuild something, there has to be a real benefit to them doing R or using R, and what are they going to get out of it that they're not getting out now. The long introduction to, do you see more sponsor organizations using R and embracing R than CROs?
Again, a very good question. I think that I think what you see is the large pharma companies and sponsors are definitely embracing it because you see the tremendous collaboration that's going on over there. If you take a look at the CRO supporting these top pharma, they will in turn also be asked exactly to use these packages, because it only makes sense. That's the next. And what I think is, with the CDISC, it had become standards. I think that the Pharmaverse, as it's continuing to grow, will become pseudo standards. And with the CROs, wanting to do that, excuse me. Also, I think for the CROs, there's usually two models. One is they have internal macros, and the second is they have they log onto the server of their sponsors, and with that, they'll use the R packages. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think that if you've got a large FSP model working for a sponsor, or they're just working under their systems and they're using R, then you're using, probably smaller CROs are following rather than leading, I think, in this regard. Which, I talked about this on LinkedIn yesterday, because are we actually changing any workflows and improving workflows with R, or are we just using a different language to take the same approach to work? And I'm asking that because I've had a lot of conversations recently, we're like, we do all this stuff, but are we actually doing it better, or are we just doing it differently?
Again, another good question. I think initially I was thinking we're just doing it differently, But then I realized that I think this is really improving the process because what I'm seeing is kind of some new standards being applied. So it's forcing us to take a closer look at the directory structure, that we have. Obviously in the submission process, there's some requirements for the folders, but this is really forcing us to adhere to that. It's forcing us for version control. It's forcing us for snapshots. So I think it's taking a look at the checklist rules for a properly regulated type environment. So I do think it's improving the workflow. As I mentioned, the R-Shiny is a way to better engage with the users in a non-technical way. And so that's really enhancing better insights into data early on and helpful to make better decisions. And in fact, the Shiny apps are kind of complementing the traditional submission. So overall, I think the workflow process is changing. And then now, of course, this is not a topic we're talking about, but the AI is also bringing into this a factor as well.
Well, we can always talk about AI because I try and bring it into every conversation. But somebody I talked to this week was saying, if you're doing something with AI, are you doing anything new and different, or are you just having AI do something like a minute? So is there AI coming into this? I mean, obviously you could say, give me some R code and prayer that it works.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, very exciting to talk about this as well. As a programmer, I'm very excited to see that AI is playing an active role, behind the scenes. And I think what you always need is a subject matter expert. The subject matter expert is the person that knows the proper question to ask, the type of details, the spec, and then knows how to phrase it. Then the subject matter expert also is the person that is aware of the response, the validity, if it makes sense, and actually to apply it. And in addition, also know if there's some issues or potential problems with the code, maybe that the AI generated. So I think, it is there to help support maybe common tasks that are performed to make things a little bit easier. You always want to review, the code, make sure it does make sense before you actually apply it in a production setting. If there's documentation that's missing, add some documentation. And I would say more along the lines of unit testing. So I think that the AI can play a role in making things a little bit easier, so you don't have to do that common coding. So it can save you a few hours for that. But I don't think I would put maybe a full program. I would do bits and pieces, snippets, in order to help save me some time, but not to create a whole script.
I would agree. And I would say this just underscores the need for somebody who's manipulating clinical data to really understand the structure of the clinical data, that there's crazy patient data behind the data, right? And I'm not saying patients are crazy, but just that I always say clinical trials are in humans, and humans are unpredictable, and you always get data that you're not expecting. And, for me, AI is at the place where it's going to expect all the data to be as expected. And we don't have that in clinical trials. And there will always be a need for a human with understanding to interact and manage that data, whether you are cleaning the data or reviewing the data or programming around the data.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That control factor is a must. So not a replacement, but more of a support and complement the tasks that are being done. So I would agree.
Any improvements to workflows or production around TFLs coming from R?
Yeah, no, that's great. So again, this is the beauty of organizations getting into R. They may say that we only are interested in R for maybe the TLGs as well as the Shiny, and that's completely fine. The nice thing about this is there's several great packages that are there that help the creation, and there's actually getting to be templates. So for example, we do a lot of safety reporting that's so common and across all the studies. So The R has packages that are, regulatory, I guess, meeting regulatory requirements as far as the outputs that are being produced. And so you can make and leverage these packages, for example, for the AE. And so there are quite a few options. And, one of the things that I do as far as guiding organizations is show them that these are what I recommend are the top 4 or 5 packages, who are the, leading sponsors behind the development of these packages, show them similarities, differences. And I think the key thing is organizations, if they understand the flexibility, the power that's there, and make sure that the packages aren't too difficult to implement. And I would strongly suggest, not using all the packages that are there, but maybe selecting 2 or 3 that meet the needs. And some organizations may be developing their own set of packages. So this is the beauty of R. If you, after taking a close look at all the packages that are there, you may think, okay, well, we can develop our own, standards, and you could definitely do that. If you do that, you can develop your own, custom function or custom package. And then with that, you can keep it internally, or if you decide, you can make that open source as well. So a lot of flexibility options, that are there for TFL production.
I think since you mentioned open source, one of the pros of R has always been that it's open source and it's free, beyond the cost of developing the packages. But are there actual cost savings that are being delivered to teams using R? I mean, there's a human cost of needing to develop R programmers and to develop and validate the R packages, that you could say that's similar to having to do programming in SAS. So what is the type of cost savings that you can see using open source versus SAS?
Yeah, another great question. So in the early days, I heard a lot from many. This is many years ago when it was a initial shift of migration towards R. Like, what's going on? I think they had reached a point that not only people were comfortable using R, but also the cost factor, that there was a threshold saying, okay, there are alternatives. We're not fixed to only using one software language, but if we go with open source, we can better manage our costs. And actually now there are quotes from organizations saying that there's definitely a cost savings there. The concept of open source, again, you have of course the R is free, but the infrastructure, the training, the support, the path going from the initial part into submission, everything that requires costs, and that requires expertise. And so without actually giving some numbers, I would say definitely they should get at least 20-30% savings from what they're traditionally doing. I guess conservatively, if not more, more than that, but at least that, because the licensing of the software is not there, but everything else is there. And then of course you have the additional flexibility. So definitely there's a cost savings. And then if you think about it, there could be increased productivity, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. These packages are there, code developed, and people can. It's like low hanging fruit. It's wonderful. So once you know R and you're comfortable in this environment, you can basically make use of any packages that are out there that give you a jump start, whether it's for source or for QC. That means there's less development costs you have internally, because some organizations have already done that for you. So definitely there's some cost savings.
And that's, as you go through and R use matures, I think that's aligns up with what you would expect. Yes, you're saving on the licensing fees from more expensive software packages. You still have to have the internal validated system and controlled infrastructure, I guess not system, but infrastructure of how you're using it, and those IT costs and those validation costs on it all remain the same.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I think, and again, this is also, the concept of the workflow that you're mentioning. In the past, we've also heard a good bit about SCE, but I think more and more organizations are realizing that it's not a nice to, but it's more of a requirement. And you also want, tools that will help, facilitate the communication, maybe batch, maybe, logs. And so what you see is in the R in the Pharmaverse, you'll see packages that would generate logs, but also generate scan of logs. You also see STTM checks, and so you'll see a proliferation of things that help you improve the process. And then again, as you mentioned, all these things they do need to be validated, and so there are some costs associated with these things, and then also training that's there as well.
So did I understand correctly then that you can use packages that are available in R to help develop your own SCE to kind of meet those, I don't want to say requirements because you're not required to have an SCE, but just to help you build an infrastructure of an SCE using R as opposed to needing additional tools?
Let's see. Let me rephrase that. I guess SCE is, as far as I know, I don't know of our package that'll help you create an SCE, but I think there's some many SCE, tools and products that are out there that will help, set this type of environment for your R's and R packages. So I think
Okay.
that's more along the lines. But yes.
Okay, so I have it backwards, but so yeah, okay. And so we talked a little bit about this before, validation programming. So where are we today? Like, is it reasonable to think you're going to use R on both sides? Is it best practice to use one on one side and one on the other? What's that looking like?
Yeah, initially, and this is what I recommend. I think that organizations getting their feet into art, they want low risk, they want to have time to build up knowledge and expertise. They're so comfortable with SaaS, so it makes sense to start off with R for QC purpose, and setting that up. So maybe a QC of listings, and then maybe build up the tables. They want to minimize what their best practices are, the SOPs, as far as differences or deviations from that. So when they're doing a proc compare and everything, they want to basically, replace a component that they'd be doing in SaaS, maybe with R. So QC is a natural way to get in, and whatever type of delivery it is, the next level or phase would be using R for production. And then, you have two ways of doing that. You can use R for production using the tidyverse for many things, or many of the packages that are there for tables or Oak and Admiral, as we talked about. Or you can use that for QC. So when you're doing R, so then you can have R for production and QC. You can have R for production. You maybe still have SaaS for QC. I think the key thing is many organizations they want to maximize the use of their resources, and so they probably want to still leverage. They don't want to build the same thing in R maybe for source and QC, but maybe use R for one of those, and then later for maybe new studies, or if they want to enhance the process, maybe they could have R being used for source and QC for particular type of deliverable. So I think it also ties in with how long that they want to continue using SaaS. There may be some, ideas and plans for that. So kind of coordinating that. So, the analogy that I have is like we're all on this our cruise ship, and there are many things factors that you're doing when you get on this cruise. You have the captain or the developers. You have the our programmers as passengers. You have the IT staff as engineers, and then you have like support staff. So there are many things, and then with this cruise, we're originally on using SaaS and everything, and now we're getting on the R cruise. So changes that are there. So a lot of things to consider.
You mentioned it in passing. I'm just going to highlight it because that's what I do. But you talked about the SOPs, and I think it's important to make sure that whatever your validation or QC SOP is talking about is that it is system generic, I think would be the first step, in bringing it into your process. Because if you have traditionally been SaaS and you are referencing SaaS in SOPs, either from a production or a validation or any programming good practice SOP you have, it needs to be system agnostic in order to support a shift in your workflow.
Yep, no, I totally agree. And I think, this introduction of R and open source and everything, it also revisit the concept of a risk-based validation. Risk-based validation, I think that organizations not always take advantage of. But with that, they can, triage. They don't always have to have 100% double programming on everything that they're doing, but things that have been really tested, very stable. In my field, when I do macro development, it takes 20 times longer, harder to test and develop test scripts for macros than it does a program, because you want to make it robust, you want to make it easy to use, and then if it's not being used, so there's some metadata processing in there. And so with that, you're building a lot of trust and expertise in the development and the QC of these macros. And so risk assignment of your deliverables is a very useful way of making sure that making better use of the resources, and the SOPs, having that is helpful moving forward. So yep.
I really appreciate that you brought in the risk-based approach to validation, because you talk about it on the data management side of data being 100% accurate, and consistent, and you can talk about that on the programming side of doing 100% validation of every single number in that package, which I mean, and that's overwhelming and not always necessary, right? I think if we were at the point where trials were collecting only the required data that you needed, then yes, 100% validation is important. But I think it's not talked about enough of bringing in a risk-based approach to validation work that's going on in statistical programming. And I think that R is kind of another tool in your toolbox, I guess, of bringing to what you might validate, how you might validate it, or what you need. And you can, if you're trying to bring it in a first case, you can do it in a low risk way on a low risk output, as opposed to totally relying on R for your primary efficacy for your first R experiment.
Yep, exactly. No, that's down. I agree.
Are you seeing anybody in data management bringing R? I think that this would be an interesting place because of the visualizations and R Shiny. Like, where are you seeing it kind of disrupt data management?
Yeah, again, a great question. I think that it is there. It's low. I think what you have is if you have champions within organizations, not only in R but in R Shiny, because they're the ones that can go beyond just to kind of the replacement of what the things that SaaS can do. You have the R Shiny that they can build because they have a complete understanding of how data management can benefit from having access to the data. And so I think that the workflow process and data management teams can learn R. It's also very compatible with EDC type systems, so they can, just like stat programming has embraced R, data management can do that as well, to take a look at the data quality that's there and the structure. But then as far as the data review, so I know in a small pharma, they have the expertise and they developed R Shiny apps in order to facilitate so that data management is able to have better track of where the data is coming in, what sites have problems, maybe lab conversion issues, things that, again, may require programming efforts. R Shinies can be designed so that there's no data merging that's needed to link files together. They can make things easier. So basically improving the workflow process of what data managers need to do to provide better service as far as the higher quality data and more timely data, and especially in things for like data cutoff when things can be pretty intense, where there's a time shortage. So Shiny apps can be designed to facilitate these types of milestones so that deadlines can be met, in advance and not right at the actual date. So
Yeah, I mean, it just where my brain was going, because I always think about people want visualizations, and people, like ClinOps or clinical development teams want visualizations of what's going on with your data. Data management needs reporting tools. There's a lot of visualization tools on the market, and traditionally they are expensive. And so it just got me thinking, like, are there packages available existing, or is it easy enough to develop to kind of bridge the gap between having nothing or having, I guess I would say, was traditionally ideal dashboards and EDC systems to use R to gain some leverage and oversight of your data management processes.
Yeah, no, definitely. In fact, for one of my clients, I developed a Shiny app called the STTM Army Knife, and basically, it does that. It's a screening as we're reviewing a lot of sponsor STTMs, for example. We needed a way to quickly identify STTM, compliance issues, maybe data issues, and then of course the data visualization. So this Shiny app enables the team to quickly identify these types of things very easily, because each study, we have a collection of maybe 25 to 30 domains, and so if you have 5 studies, you can see that having a tool such as a Shiny app greatly facilitates the review of these STTMs for within a study and then across the study. So, and then with that, you can take some actions, make some decisions, and then get updated and corrected data.
Does that give data management insight into maybe what some of those SDTM issues would be before a programming team actually maybe picked up the programming to develop them?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because there's a lot of, queries that need to be tracked that the stat programming team will identify, and then, getting those resolved. So it's a process that we don't want to, lose track of and document throughout the process.
This wasn't a planned question, so I'll just put you on the spot here. We talked about it last time we had this question in here. I think it's a little different now because there's been so much progress with R. But if an organization or a stat programming team has not even started at all with R in any way yet, what advice would you give them to do first to start to bring it in-house?
Yeah, I think I think there's a lot of opportunities to attend webinars. I attend webinars very regularly because I want to learn from others in this field. Everybody benefits from this, the experience, the issues that they encounter, the ideas, the concepts, the packages, So I think being open to a new way of doing things is very important. Understanding that the questions, issues that you have are not isolated. Everybody goes through them. As I teach my class, I explain the same thing. In fact, I share my journey as I learned are the obstacles that I encountered, because I want them to realize that these are issues that everybody faces. So you're not alone. And I think that people may think that they're alone, but I think I think that they can tap into these resources. They can learn about it, and then they can take next steps. They can, take some training on these topics. There's resources out there, but I think, many people come to me who actually know our programming, but they come to me. I asked them. I said, "Why are you coming to my class?" So they said they want structure. They want structure in learning R. As I mentioned, R has many things that can turn off and give you the impression that, okay, this is not the right way to go, mainly because it's I feel that it's more technical. It's a thousand jigsaw puzzle pieces that you have to enjoy doing. So there's a variety of things, but I think that if you realize the big picture of what's going on in the industry, there are ways that you can get to feel more comfortable. Gradually do this. I think it requires more long-term planning because it's not a quick fix, it's not a quick solution, but it's more long-term planning, and people, need to rethink, and plan towards that. But I think that they will find that it is rewarding. And again, not to make a complete transition into R, because maybe they really don't want to do that, and so nobody's forcing them to do that. But make an educated guess as to, educated decision as to where you want to make use of R, and I think that will really help them and their organization, move forward. So, and there, I think resources for that.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a little bit of drinking from the fire hose. It is for me, for R, and it's kind of understanding where, just exposing yourself to how people are using cases and webinars from teams that have used it have used it extensively and done successful things with it, can help you start understanding where and how you could use it. And it's more than downloading or accessing the package and trying it out, because generally you're working in a protected IT infrastructure, and that will need to be maintained. So it's an understanding of what do you have to do to even pilot it in your organization becomes important. It's funny that you said it's technical. I cannot learn R. I've tried multiple times. It's well beyond, my programming is old. My experience is old, so it's hard to pull back, but it is a lot more technical. And I think that there's a lot of programmers in clinical research who are technical programmers and enjoy technical programming. And I think that's an interesting thing. I think R gives you the opportunity to look at more and do more in a more creative way, I think, than SAS. So for me, that's a benefit. And it's time, if you haven't had the conversation with yourself or your peers at your organization, and you're a leader in statistical programming, it's time to understand, if you haven't brought in R yet or haven't experienced with it, why is that? And have more of a case of defending why not than a case of defending why, and start looking for what's the block and what are some potential low risk areas to start exploring with R. Because I do think that every organization will have to use it in some capacity, just because of the connectivity to other things and the better visualizations you get regardless of where you are in the process.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And along those lines, I'll put a mention about Pharma Forest. That's actually the open source for SaaS packages. So open source is not restricted to R. That concept has really grown. And when I first learned about Pharma Forest, I was like, oh, wow, this is really nice. So people, can benefit from the open source and not even leave SaaS if they wanted to.
Yeah, I learned something new. I didn't know that existed. So think ahead, look into your crystal ball, 5-10 years out, maybe 5 years and 10 years out. Where is clinical research in R?
Yeah, I think R would definitely continue to grow. I think that there's good traction. It'll continue to be slow growth, but I think it will happen. I think that there will probably a time when the number of packages within Pharmaverse will pretty much kind of mature, meaning that we've covered and filled all the gaps in our process. There probably updates in the versions in the packages. I think that people will realize there will be a point where more and more people will be using the Admiral and Oak. I think those two will be shining stars. I think that the growth of the table packages will be there. Mainly because the design of these packages, they're templates. So these templates again assume that there's some common goals, common sets of domains, common sets of variables. Because keep in mind that this whole CDIS set the groundwork for some standards. Once you have that, then you can go to town. Then people, whatever they develop will be worked off the standards. Everybody is playing in the same playground with these standards. So these packages, will be helpful. So I think, people will learn and make use more and more of these packages than they have before. I think people, don't realize that this is a gold mine, so to speak, or what I say, a candy store, meaning that these resources are out there, and it can be overwhelming. But I think that you'll see more of the shiny apps. I think that they're very underutilized. And I think that's because there's another learning curve, for that. But I think as people are aware of these things, they will embrace it. They'll continue to embrace it. And then that will be better for the whole industry because we will get things done a little bit better, faster, be able to manage maybe more studies with the same number of resources, and then the higher quality of the data, higher quality of submissions. That's the ultimate goal.
Do you still see traditional statistical programmers in 10 years?
Yeah, yeah. I think statistical programmers were kind of like the glue, I would say, in between data management and stats. We combine, we understand the data, we work with the statisticians. So I think that the role of stat programming is still there, and it's more going to be a hybrid. I think that programmers will be more like analysts. They will not just do the coding, but they'll need to have a better understanding of the clinical study, the primary, secondary endpoints, safety. They also need to have a better understanding of the technology, their end goal submissions and their user base, so that they can better meet the growing needs. Whether it's phase 1, phase 2, so that they're more aware. We can't be just narrow focused, only doing one thing repeatedly. When I come across SAS programmers, for example, and they only do data set programming and they don't know SQL, they're missing out. It's like only using one half of your brain, not the other half. And so, I think that this role will continue to evolve, and even with the AI coming in, you still have to have that subject matter expert in order to do something with that type of information that's being generated.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's the message, right? It's changing now. It could be changing again in 10 years. You might be off of R and onto something else. But ultimately, the way the technology is moving is going to change and impact the day-to-day activity of heads down programming. And so being aware of what you need to know and how to adapt to that, and learning. I'm sure many people do this. I'm not putting anybody saying that they don't, but really understanding what is the bridge between data management and statistics, what is going on in the clinical trial, what is the design and how it is impacting, how it can impact and influence what the results are and how you are getting to those results, and role in delivering the data will go a long way to helping future-proof, I guess, the career from being a heads down programmer.
Yep, I totally agree.
Well, thank you again for your time for this another great discussion on R. I really enjoyed it and I learned a couple things, and I really appreciate you sharing your time and wisdom with me and everybody else.
My pleasure. Thanks, Amanda, for organizing this. I really enjoyed this podcast and I hope everybody can really benefit from this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.